The first game on our list is Council of Blackthorn.
Designed by J. Meyer. Sorry, I said that very country sounding like
Meyer. We're from Kentucky.
Yeah.
We are,
yes.
J. Meyer, I believe. Yes, artist, there's about 10 of them, and then published by Great Northern Games.
So Council of Blackthorn, there's a story, but basically the king's dying and you want his throne, but you're trying to do everything you can to frame everyone else or do very treasonous things to get that crown. Unfortunately, that might be bad for you because whoever has the most treason at the end of the game is beheaded and cannot win. Otherwise, whoever has the most victory points. So the game is pretty simple. There is a board in the middle of the table that has 4 different tracks. These tracks represent, I guess, kind of like a faction or the house, like the royals, the guild, peasants. What's the 4th one? The military. We're going to call it military.
Axe.
I don't remember.
Legion.
Legion. Yes, you're right. But it's basically the military.
Yeah.
It's like the branches of government or something. I don't know. Anyway, they have a track, and I believe each track has about 10 spaces, and they're essentially victory points at the end of the game, but they're also used as a requirement to do the effects of cards, because you might have to be so far along a track to be able to perform a specific card's action. Mm-hmm. One of the in-game conditions, or I think the only in-game condition, if I remember correctly, is if 3 of the 4 tracks are locked down, and the way they get locked down is by somebody getting into the 10th spot, which is worth 13 points. Once you get there, it's pretty much impossible to knock somebody out of that position other than maybe a special ability here and there. What's going to happen is at the beginning of the game, you're going to get like a card that will give you special abilities or actions that you can do during your turn. Sometimes it will affect your setup, like you might not get as many cards and things like that or whatever. And then you're going to start the game. The first player, when you start the game, actually, you get some of these treason cards I was talking about. Let's go ahead and tell you about that because that's pretty important. The treason deck is a massive deck of cards that literally is just 0, 1, 2, or 3. Each of the cards has a name, so all the 3s in the deck are named poison, etc., because certain cards will reference those. There is a house deck of cards that has cards from all 4 of the tracks. So like they have red cards that are royal, gold cards that are the guild, etc. There's also some green cards that do something crazy, but we'll talk about those in a minute. Anyway, you're going to get a hand of 5 of those cards. You get 3 treason cards at random. You're pretty much ready to begin. The first player is going to roll the dice. So each of the tracks has a die that matches the color, and it's going to have pips on it, 1, 2, or 3. And I believe there is 2 1s, 2 2s, a 0, and a 6, if I remember correctly.
Or a 3.
Or a 3, yeah. 0.
And a 3.
Yeah, 0, 1, 2, and 3, but there's only one side of the 6 and 0.
Right.
So they're going to roll those 4 dice, place them in their appropriate spots next to each track, and then you're ready to begin. Each person takes a turn until all 4, or however many players you're playing with, takes a turn. Then the round ends. You move the first player marker to your left. Then you roll the dice again, and you do the same thing until 3 of those 4 tracks have been locked down. On your turn, it's pretty simple. Basically, you're going to get to perform one action. An action is going to be labeled as action. It's going to be on your player card that you get at the beginning of the game, or on buildings that you've actually built throughout the game. There's only 2 types of cards: buildings that stay around and allies that when you play them, they go away. So and after you play an action or don't play an action, you get to play 1 card from your hand. When you play that card, you're going to do 2 things. 1, whatever color the card is, as long as it's one of those 4 colors on the of the tracks. Say you play a red card, which is royal. Then you look at the royal track and you look at the die. The die is going to have you do some things. You only do the die, and then you're going to do the card effect on the card. So if the die says 1 or 2, you get to move up on that track 1 or 2 spaces. If it says 3, you can move up 3 spaces, but it completely destroys the card basically. So you sacrifice the card in order to move pretty fast on that track. If it's a 0, you get to perform the action on your card without meeting the requirements. You also get to give away one of your treason cards to somebody at random.
And taking 3 real quick, backing up.
It does give you 2
treasons.
Right,
treason
it does
cards.
give you 2 treasons. So it is a good action to take, but it might be more of a jump to finish type of action. But we'll come out to that.
And when you say if you take the 0 die action, you give away a card. The card is selected at random.
And you choose somebody to give it to.
Yes.
Yeah, that was you could interpret it what I said 2 different ways, I guess. Yeah, so you choose one of your treason cards or at random, not choose, and then you give it to somebody specifically. Anyway, then you get to do the action on the card, and most of the time, that action, I think all the time, is going to have you required to be so far along another track. So if you play the Royal, it might say that you need to be 3 spaces up on the guild track for the special ability to take effect. In the case of a building, if you don't meet that, the building's destroyed. Otherwise, it goes into construction, and then at the beginning of your next turn, you get to untap it, essentially, and you can use it from then on. It's usually just an action that you can choose or a passive ability. Whereas the ally cards are simply one-use cards. It might allow you to draw new cards. It might allow you to get victory points somehow or do something cool or do something not cool to other people. After that, you get to discard one of your cards from your hand if you would like and then draw back up to 5, and that's pretty much the end of your turn. It's the next player's turn, and so on and so forth. Then you keep doing that until, like I said, 3 of the 4 tracks are locked down. Then you get points, and you're going to get points from the building cards that you've played. They have a static amount of points on them. As you're playing the game, you can do things to get victory point chips, which are all face down and hidden. You can count those up. And I think there's maybe another thing, I can't remember offhand, but it's not a big deal. You get points from a lot of different sources. And then after you've revealed your total score, then the players count up their treason cards, and whoever has the most is beheaded.
Yeah. At the end of your turn, which is kind of a unique
aspect
of the game, is you if you're ahead on any of the tracks, you get victory points.
That's true. Yeah, you get victory points for being the furthest on a track and then having the most buildings.
Buildings, yeah.
Yeah. So anything else we'll just bring up as we talk. But what did you think about this, Eric?
Oh, yeah. It surprised me. I liked it better than I originally thought I was, although I did like the theme of it. And I usually don't like games as much when there is like one person that just gets taken out of the running. I think that's in like Lords of Ziddit, where if you don't, do a specific thing, you're totally out. It doesn't matter how many points you have. I didn't typically like that, but I did understand it in this game, and it was all right.
Thematically, it makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Are you saying you don't like it in Lords of Ziddit?
I don't like it in Lords of Ziddit.
That's one of my favorite parts of that game.
Those kind of mechanics in a game. Although
it's
it works
like
in this game.
It's different in Lords of Ziddit, though, because it's a lot of like cutting off the slow swimmers. Like
right.
in Lords of Ziddit, it's mostly about you can't be great at one thing. You have to have good
balance.
At everything. Right. In this one, it's not necessarily the same because this one's more. You can have a lot of treason cards and maybe look like you're going to be beheaded. And so people can think, well, Tim's got 15 treason cards and I have 3. I can draw more, but 14 of mine can be zeros.
Right.
Which I think is a great mechanism because it's like he's been doing a lot of treacherous things, but it's gone unnoticed by the king. Because maybe he doesn't think that it's treasonous, or maybe he's corrupt in some way to think he's doing some things to get back at somebody, whereas they were the treasonous one.
Right.
I know, it's so cool.
Yeah. And then since your victory points are hidden for the most part, there is a track that does show everybody who's kind of ahead, but doesn't take into account any victory points that you have face down. Is that right? No, there is no track on the board.
No, there's just 4 tracks.
Sorry. That's right. Well,
you get points from those tracks.
Yeah. You get points from the track, so you kind of can speculate, like, all right, he's going to get 8 points for this track and 7 points for this track.
I mean, you can see that, but everything else is hidden.
Right, so that part of it you could kind of use to influence other people and be like, oh, George is ahead. So
table talk a little bit.
Right.
Yeah, table talk. He's up on 2 of the 3 or 4 tracks. That's huge.
Yeah, and he's got 8 points, the last 2 rounds.
Yeah.
So we should go after George. So I did like that aspect of the game as well. Although George won the game that we played by a decent amount, and I don't think we pegged him as a winner at that point.
I think that's the trick to this game is don't get out to a lead. Don't make yourself a target.
Right.
Don't be the leader that everyone's going to bash.
Yes. You want to be second leader.
we initially thought that it was going to be that Munchkin-y style of, oh, wow, somebody's in the lead, destroy them.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see people knee-jerk reactioning to that as you play the first time, but it's almost a poor strategy to do because that person might be up on some of the tracks, but at the same time, they might have 20 chips in front of them for victory points where somebody else has 5. Or what I'm trying to say is one person might appear that they're going to be far up on all the tracks, but they don't have any victory points, whereas somebody else is stashing a huge amount of victory points in front of them, but doesn't have a board presence to show that.
Right.
So it's an interesting balance of really understanding what people are doing each round and remembering that.
Yeah.
And man, there's so many cards in this game. I wish there was more of a way to like look at other players like so many of their treason cards just to view it.
Oh, that's an interesting idea.
Right? Like
You get
look
to see
at
some of them.
look at 5 treason cards of a player at random.
Now there's one
And they have like
person
10 or something.
that was able to do that in the game.
Oh.
But you had to have that what was it? The class card, not class card.
That was the spider player
Right.
ability.
It was Cat's ability.
Mm-hmm.
She could give you a card and then look at your hand of treason cards and take one back.
Whoa.
Oh, take a poison back.
No,
I think she had to give a poison away and take a poison.
No, she had to give a 2 away, whatever that was.
Spy.
A spy away to the person. She can look at their entire hand
You know,
and
I
take
really-
any card that she wanted.
I really didn't even think of that, but that makes sense. She's given a spy to them.
hmm She's sending a spy over.
Yeah, and they
yeah.
can look at their hand. That's brilliant. I
Right.
like it.
Mm-hmm. And she was the spider.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if she ended the game with at least, exactly
one
poison card, she was immune to poison or immune to treachery.
treason.
So she didn't count up any of those. Yeah.
Right.
It really did have a Game of Thrones sort of idea behind it. Like
Sure.
the spider is the master of whispers and he sends out spies. I mean, that makes sense. Having said that, I didn't really feel the theme during the game.
No, you didn't really feel like the person that you was playing. Maybe
No.
hers was the most thematic.
Well, I was playing the queen. Nobody once called me Your Grace
Right.
during the game.
And it says so on the card.
It says on the card, you have to call me Your Grace.
It is
Nobody
italics.
did.
It's flavor text.
There should be a penalty. There should
Yeah.
be a penalty if you don't.
Decatur.
And I think every one of the players should have something like that, almost like one of the quirks from Heroes Wanted.
Oh yeah,
You know, and if you don't do it, you
There's
get
a penalty.
penalized.
Yeah.
that'd be an interesting variant that you can
Yeah.
include. I don't.
Definitely a variant.
Yeah, I mean, I
I
guess
would
it's
like
a,
that.
It's a variant in Heroes Wanted as well.
Yeah, that's
So,
true. If you had more role playing of your actual
Oh yeah.
character in the game, I think it would lend more to the theme.
I
That
would
is an
agree.
interesting way to say it. This game it's actually got a lot of theme, but it's still like abstract.
Right.
Right, because everything you're doing makes sense if you think about it and look at the imagery or like idea of what's happening. But really, all you're doing is moving stuff. I guess every board game you're just moving stuff around, but
Right.
but you don't feel it as you're doing it, which is really weird because this game is really deep in theme. I think ideology wise, but then when you actually play the game, the mechanics don't really portray that. But in the very background, they do.
House rule, you have to tell a story as to what you're doing
Yeah.
with each card.
Right, yeah. I mean, some of them are pretty obvious. I'm sending archers, I'm shooting you. But, like, you know, it's just interesting because, like, you can forget about the theme very easily for this game, even though it is there and present, and it makes a lot of sense if you really think about it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
Which
really,
it's unfortunate that you can be disconnected from it in that way.
yes. Right, it feels disconnected, but it almost isn't disconnected. It's a weird blend of that, I guess. What'd you think, Matt?
You know, I like the game. I liked all the kind of choosing with the dice to if you wanted to either move up on the track or get your card abilities. That was interesting. I do feel like at times it took a little bit of, you know, a little luck based, I guess. Just based on trying to build your hand on what you were trying
What
to
might
do.
come.
And that's just because you're trying to plan something that's like, man, I need one of these cards so I've got enough to do stuff with this house now, but I'm not getting any of the cards because I'm high on this track. So that it sometimes you're just like, man, I'm not getting any of these cards, and it's kind of hard to do stuff if you're not getting the cards. But I guess that is why the zero rolls are there to help you for when that does happen. And like I said, maybe part of my problem was I was just trying to figure something out to do and forcing it instead of just kind of going with what I was handed. So it might be something to look at in the second play later on.
The only weird thing I would change, honestly, and I don't know, I haven't really thought about it that deep. It's just like when it's a 3 on the die, I'd almost rather you be able to ignore that and do a 1. Or even ignore that and not move up on the track, but still be able to perform your card in normal conditions.
Just have the option.
Have the option, because I feel like it sounds
That would
cool.
change the whole game.
Well, but it would change the game, I think, for the better, because I think the 3 actually ruined more actions than it actually presented good rolls. Like, I did not want 3s rolled.
No, typically
They were not fun.
2, right?
But it gives you so many spaces up the track that it, that's the trade-off that you have to make.
I would almost
Right.
rather cycle more
You're making
cards.
a big move, but
You're
in
making
order
a big
to do
move,
so-
but it's only. But think about it. With a 2, you get to move up 2 spaces and perform your card.
Possibly.
But you're probably not going to cast the card if you can't do it, unless it's early on.
right.
But bear with me. I'm just saying, if you have the option and you can meet the requirements on the card and it's a 2, you get to do the full card. You get to move up 2 spaces. You get to do your entire turn. If it's a 3, you literally get penalized, and
Well, I
you
wouldn't
get to
say
move up
totally
just one more
penalized.
space.
Right.
That one space,
That's 50% more.
yeah, but it's not worth not doing an entire action.
So
if you're able to, right? I mean, your
Especially if
preference-
you're already up on the space and somebody's at 13 or you're in the 13 space. 3s are terrible.
There are times.
It is just not a fun thing at that point.
Okay. But there are going to be times where doing a certain thing is going to be disadvantageous to you, whether it's a 0 or a 3. So don't do it. Be patient and,
True, but I point this out specifically because the back of the book has strategic tips, and the strategic tips tell you to focus on 2 tracks. So if you're focused on 2 tracks and you're keeping 2 different cards, and one of them comes up a 3, half your hand is gone, or even most of your hand. So I feel like maybe the strategic tip is wrong, but it makes sense that, you don't want to focus on all 4 tracks. You kind of want to, because they combo off each other somewhat. I think there's, like, for Royals, there's a lot of guild activated abilities. So you need those 2 tracks. And I felt like that's what I was going after. But for like 3 or 4 rounds in the entire game, there was a 3 rolled for the, or sorry, I said Royals, but I meant the Legion, the black track.
Yes.
There was like 3 or 4 times throughout the whole thing, it was a 3. And like 3 of my 5 cards were black.
going off that track.
Right. And so, like, I spent the cards and I went up to the front of the line on it or something, but at the same time, then it kept rolling and then it just nullified all those cards. So I got there fast to be able to do nothing.
Well, that track, if you're playing a black card and you're up on the black track, that doesn't necessarily matter because you actually want to be up on a different track.
I was already up on the Royals track. I said the Royals and Guild. What I meant was the Legion and Royals. So I moved up fast on the Legion track to the end, but then, and I had already done the Royal track. So I was meeting all my card requirements.
Okay.
Because all the cards do not go past 5. So once you get up to the 5th space, you can perform any of the cards that require you to do that faction. But I was focusing on doing Legion cards, and literally like 4 rounds, it was a 3.
I would also say that it does incentivize you to go further up because the first 5, you only get 1 VP. And after that, it goes up by, I believe, 2 and 3.
Yep.
And then the last one is, I think, like a 4 or 5 point spread.
Yeah, it goes from
In
9 to
context
13.
with what I was saying, that makes no sense, but I agree with you.
Yeah. But
'Cause
there's
I'm saying I was already at the end, so if I chose to play a card that
well,
was
in
black,
that case, right.
then it doesn't go up. But now I agree with you, because once you get past 5, it goes up by 2s, and then all the way up to 13 or whatever. So it makes sense, yes. But I don't know. I wasn't a big fan of the 3.
You know what I wasn't a fan of? How they moved first player. So we played like a 6-player game.
Oh yeah, I got
So so you take your turn, and then there's 5 other people that take their turn, and then the first player moves to your left, and you have those 5 other people taking another turn before it comes back to you. So you essentially have 10 turns before you take another action.
Yep.
Yeah, that is pretty bad, especially because there's really not that much to think about outside of your turn.
Right.
I will say, though, after the first play, I can see this game just being pretty fast.
Yeah,
Like, I don't think people's turns are going to
fast,
be that
but
fast.
10
That's slow.
turns is still
I took the
10
same
turns
note.
of, yeah.
Yeah. And what is the reason that the first player has to be passed around? Why not just keep going around and around and around? Why?
That's true.
You know, ironically, I think that so I had the Kickstarter edition, and the card or the first player marker that you passed is actually a big medallion style coin. It's pretty awesome. But I realized this now that we're talking about it. The original components, I think it had a first, like both of the sides were two separate coins. So I wonder if you could just keep the coin as whoever the starting player of the game is, and then just pass the other one to show who gets to roll the dice
Right.
or something. I don't know.
And then you just
Which is
nobody has to wait.
The starting player of the game doesn't matter because you don't get additional actions if you didn't have the same amount of actions or anything.
It's not like you're drafting cards.
Right. It's not
Right.
that much of an advantage if it's an advantage.
Really,
at
when
all.
your turn is solo. I mean, essentially, you're
Yeah.
not interacting with anybody.
Right.
At least very little.
And everybody gets the same amount of turns because when the game's triggered, you still play to the end of the round. So it's not like.
There are some take that cards though. That's true. But I don't think it would matter if you just went around and around in the order.
No,
It would still work out the same way.
Yeah.
I would think.
Do you think it'd be better if you passed the first player marker to the right, or would you still have the same issue?
No, you wouldn't have that same issue.
It'd be better, but then you'd have someone going twice in a row.
Yeah.
That could be. That's true. Well, either way, I mean, point is, we didn't like that, so we don't have to like redesign the game. So I agree with you. I didn't really like that much. But in a 6-player game is what we played. Maybe it's more of a big deal than it would be in a 4-player game, so to speak. You know, in 4 players, it's probably not as bad to go around the table 7 other turns. 7 turns sound like a lot, but each turn could literally be 25 seconds. So,
True.
not too bad. It is annoying in a 6-player game, though. Anything else?
Yes, at the start of the game, how many cards that are treason cards did you start with? Was it 3?
3.
Everyone got 3?
Well,
Matt
the spider
started with
actually makes
0.
everybody else start with 1 more, but Matt started with the character that starts with none.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So okay, everyone starts with 3 treason cards, and those cards can range from 0 to 3.
Yes.
Right.
You could have someone start the game with 0 treason points and someone start the game with 9
Right.
right off the bat.
Although, I mean, I guess that
You've got plenty of ways to get rid of them.
that
though.
incentivizes
Yeah.
you to take some zeros, do your action of the card, and give away one of those.
Okay,
If
that's
you
true.
did have 3 threes.
Yeah. So if you see someone take a
I
bunch of
just give it-
zeros,
Yeah.
Actually, once we played the game, I wish I would have picked a different character. I didn't think treason cards were that big of a deal. Unless people are piling up on you and you end up with
Yeah.
a big stack of it. But I mean, I think there are ways to kind of mitigate receiving a lot.
that's true. Those
Like,
zeros.
did you feel
yeah.
like there was too much of a way to mitigate it?
No, because I mean, to mitigate it, you're not moving up on the track.
Oh, that's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're
So, I mean,
sacrificing something to do
Yes.
so.
But I mean, if you're worried about getting killed, you know, at the end of the game, there you can
You do what you have to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Mhm.
Anyway, I was really surprised by this game. I actually thought we were going to play it once and be like, nah, that was okay.
Yeah.
And then get rid of it. But I'm keeping it. I think it
Yeah.
was awesome.
I liked it.
I liked it for the amount of players that it plays and the type of game it is. If you want some take that, but you don't want to be bombarded like you are in Munchkin or something like that,
Yes.
like this is a perfect game because it gives me the feel of it's not anything like Munchkin at all, but I can see the same audience enjoying it specifically because what's going on. There is a lot of I'm playing this on you, ha ha, ha, you
Right.
know, take more treason cards or whatever. And so it has that take that feel, but it's not that pile on take that other games have where it's I'm get ready to win. All right, everybody pulls out their machine guns they've been hiding behind the back this whole
Yeah.
time
Right.
that fires
Yes.
knives.
And you're done.
Yeah.
The game that it reminded me of is Red Dragon Inn.
Oh, really?
The game where you're playing take that cards for
Mhm.
drinks that people have to take, and you have track, or you have a track.
Is it actually a drinking game?
Oh,
mean,
you could.
It could be, but no, it's not.
It's a
No.
drink and you'll die.
Probably.
Yeah, some of the
It's
drinks
like
are
Drunk Quest.
like poisonous. Yeah, and it has tracks that these cards move you up and down on these tracks. So it's sort of reminiscent of that. I was pleasantly surprised by it. I think I would prefer this one. I know I would prefer this game to Red Dragon Inn.
That's fair. Cool. Anything else? Final thoughts?
I'll just the player abilities. I think for the first time we didn't feel like anything was like overpowered, but at the same time it was like nothing was super special.
That's
Yeah.
fair.
They were oddly kind of neutral.
Yeah, if I had to say anything about the player powers, there was almost too many player powers. Now I do have some of the Kickstarter things, I guess, because there's only 6 in the base game.
And there's plenty to choose from too.
Well, now if you're playing 6 players, you play with all 6 of them. But I had, I think, 5 other ones.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But the only problem is, I think some of the starting cards actually had one action and a bunch of stuff that happens at setup. And that's not as fun as having like 3 separate actions that you can choose
do
from
every
throughout
time.
the game.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Which
good point.
that's what I had. I had one action that I could do if a certain track was a 3, which happened once in the whole game.
But I mean, I guess realistically, since you
But I
can
had
only
2
do
passives.
yeah, you can only do one action anyway that you can get from your buildings. And so if you get really cool buildings, you might be doing those actions all the time anyway.
Right.
And so then your card becomes more powerful because you only have one action, but you had all those passives that worked out, whereas I only have one passive and 3 actions to choose from. So if I started playing buildings a lot, then my starting card basically did nothing for me. So I guess it does make sense. I'm not saying they're not balanced, but I think that more of them should have at least 2 actions, or all of them should have at least 2 actions, because that
One like
the
really
option-
basic action for everybody.
Yeah, because you don't feel like you're trapped into doing that one thing or having to get buildings out, because buildings are not an early game thing.
Right.
I mean, unless there's zeros, I guess, then you can put buildings out, but then you can't actually use the abilities until you get up on that track. So interesting dilemma, but great
Also,
game.
in a game like this where you're negotiating and trying to convince people that you're not winning and convince people to bash other people, it doesn't matter if the powers are balanced. It's sort of a cosmic encounter situation where it's like, well,
You can balance it.
we're not
through,
balanced, so we're
yeah.
going to balance it by giving you treason cards.
That's fair. That's fair. His ability seems broken. Everybody give him treason.
Absolutely.
So, well, cool. Anything else, or are we done?
No.
I recommend it. I think it's good.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep.
All right. Well, check it out. It's Council of Blackthorn.